had tickets for a plane that crashed, killing everybody on board. On July 17, 2007, I was supposed to fly from Porto Alegre to Sao Paulo because I had taken a substitute exam that night at the university. I was still taking my degree, but I was a consultant back then too, so I had to travel a lot. My grades were not the greatest, so I was sure that I didn't have enough to be approved on one specific class. Hence, I would have to take the substitute exam to boost my grade and maybe be approved on that class. The tickets were purchased and everything was fine. On the morning of July 17th, 2007, the teacher posted the grades on the system and I had enough to pass that class. Therefore, I didn't need to go anymore, so I canceled the ticket. I worked like crazy, and then by 7 p.m., I opened up the news website and there were reports of a plane crash in Sao Paulo. I didn't really pay much attention until they mentioned that the flight came from Porto Alegre. I checked the flight number, my tickets. It was shocking. I'm happy and thankful I didn't take that flight, but also sorry for those who lost their lives that night.
The year was 1977. I had taken time off work to have a baby and to stay home with her, but I still needed income, so my mother hired my younger sister and myself to do the dirty, back-breaking work in her shop while she stayed home to take care of her first infant granddaughter. My sister and I were working at our mom's antique shop one summer day. Mom had just gotten a truckload of European oak furniture that had to be cleaned and polished, and had the handles screwed on and so forth. A nice-looking young man came into the store and started talking to my sister, who was 17 at the time. He introduced himself as Ted Smith, and we laughed and said that he must be related, as my mother's maiden name is also Smith. He chatted both of us up, but focused on my sister for the most part. He wanted to purchase an armoire, and said that he had to go get his truck, since at the moment he was driving around this old Volkswagen Bug. He then asked my sister and I if we wanted to go out to dinner with him. We were sweaty and dirty from work, and I had a baby to take care of, and my sister already had a boyfriend. So we said, "Thanks, but no thanks, Ted." He then asked me to ride with him to get his truck, so he could drop off his Volkswagen at the auto shop for repairs. But by that point, I had to get home to my infant right away, because I was still nursing her at the time, and thought that my breasts were going to begin leaking at any minute. However, he wouldn't give up trying to get one or both of us away from the shop. He said that he could be back at about 10 o'clock that evening, and asked whether one or both of us would be there. "No, we close the shop at 6, and we both have places to be tonight." He was persistent. "How about tomorrow night?" "No, we close at 6, except on Saturdays, when we close at 4. He then asked if one of us could meet him early in the morning, around 5:30 a.m., but neither of us wanted to. He was getting to be a bit creepy, and my sister and I were eye-rolling each other. Eventually he said that he was sorry, but he couldn't buy the armoire if we couldn't be flexible. We hated having to give up a sale, but after he'd been there for 2 hours, we thought he was just looking and taking up our time. We just wanted to finish our work and go home. At 6 o'clock p.m., as we were leaving, his Volkswagen Bug was parked outside. He then asked us if we wanted to go for coffee. He especially wanted my sister to accompany him. We said, "Thanks, Ted, but no thanks. Like we said earlier, we have plans." But he continued to be insistent. Finally, I said, "Sis, let's go. I'll take you home," even though she had her car there. For some reason, I didn't want her to drive home alone with this guy around, so he drove off in his Volkswagen, and we didn't think of it again, until the next year, when his picture appeared in the paper. Ted Bundy. It sent chills up my spine. My sister and I still talk about it occasionally, We were two lucky women that day. If either one of us had agreed to go, we would have been raped and murdered, like the other 30 women that Bundy kidnapped.
I guess this isn't as scary as some of the other stories that involve the supernatural, but I was about 24 and living in Seattle. My roommate was away, and her friend Amy invited me out for a drink. My boyfriend didn't feel like going, so it was just us. I made sure to tell her it's just a drink or two, since I knew she was a bit wild. And I really wasn't that close to her, but I was new to the area and needed friends, so I took $20 with me. No ATM card, no nothing. I wanted an excuse in case she wanted to stay out too late. Previously, I'd gone with her and my roommate to a bar where she knew the owner and the bartenders. It was a total dive bar and kinda sketchy. On this, my roommate and I agreed. We're talking leather vests and bare chest. No offense, just a tough crowd, and way older. She asked us to go back there a few times, but we always said nah, because the place was just sketchy, and the owner was skeevy. And that's putting it mildly. Let's call him Lou. And the bar, Lou's. So we go out, and this already sounds like a terrible idea already. Though she was wild, she was good people, and I still abide by that. Again, just a drink or two. We went up to Capitol Hill, which has a lot of fun bars and is a very nice and safe area. I bought us our first 2 beers, $4, and tipped the bartender $1. I had 15 left. When I come back with the drinks, she's talking to 2 preppy looking clean-cut guys about some outdoor concert venue that's apparently fabulous. She introduces me. I'm asking questions about the place and yada yada, talking music. Next morning I wake up in my underpants in my roommate's bed, next to Amy, who is still completely dressed. What the? I'm so confused and embarrassed because, good lord, we are hardly close enough that I dress in front of her, let alone sleep half naked in a bed with her. I kinda just ask what the heck happened, and admit that I can't remember anything. I feel groggy but not hungover. Just like I want to go back to sleep. She laughs and says it was a really wild night. We must have drank a lot because she can't remember anything either. I kinda laugh with her, but I'm confused. I'm not a person who can drink well. If I drink too much, I'm sick that night and the following day, so I tend not to. I'm a really small chick, so it hits easily. But even when I've drank too much, I remember things. This time, I remember nothing after 1 beer. We have coffee and try to piece the night together. My roommate's sheets are all bloody because my knees are scabby and my palms and wrist are all scratched up. Internally, I'm freaking out, but I try to stay calm. She seems to think it's par for the course, and for her, maybe it is, but the bleeding, the memory loss, and then comes the part where I check my pants and yes, they are ripped at the knees. How badly does a person have to fall if their jeans rip like that and their knees? In the pocket is $15. All the money I had after my first beer. I ask Amy how much she has left, and she says she owes me a bunch of drinks because she has all her money left. Maybe those guys we saw bought us drinks? Still, I don't even remember finishing the first one that I bought. After she leaves, I call my boyfriend to tell him sorry that I didn't let him know that I got home safe. He says I did call, sounded completely sober but was babbling about being afraid. He asked if he should come, but I told him no, I'm in bed, I'm fine. So he didn't. I start the shift from being confused and kind of mortified, thinking I drank to black out, and then I began to think maybe something horrible happened. I'm home alone now and cannot remember a thing. Nothing. Not even what's the last thing you remember. I just don't. Later that afternoon, Amy calls me to tell me that Lou called her to ask if I was okay and make sure that we were safe. According to Lou, Amy came running into his bar crying that we needed help. He thought she was drunk, but she ran out of his bar, and he ran after her so she wouldn't run into the street. Way up the block, he saw me struggling as 2 guys were practically dragging me. This next part took about 10 seconds. He started to run up, but he was still a ways away. He said they were approaching a parked car. I put my hands up in a okay gesture, and they let me stand. As one let go to open the door, I walked toward the car with the other calmly, then kicked him and took off running. And Lou met me on the way. By the time he thought to let go of me and chase them, they were in the car and taking off, and he couldn't catch up. He brought me back to the bar because Amy and I were a crying mess. My jeans were torn. I was bleeding, apparently from being dragged. I kept asking him to please help me get my pants off so I could pee, because I couldn't figure out the belt. Yes, the same guy I avoided at first like the plague because he skeeved me, I was asking now to take my pants down. I was drugged, obviously. I was drugged and nearly shoved into a car. I thank God and my parents' DNA that somehow in a haze, I had the mind to pretend I would cooperate and stop fighting them. I have so many questions. How come no one on the street questioned those two guys dragging a woman? My guess is, it was those clean-cut guys, and they probably said I was drunk and people believed them. I don't even know what time it was. Maybe we were at the bar till later, before they brought us out, and the streets were clearer. Maybe they took us somewhere else first for a while, which led me to wonder what really happened. I went for a hypnotherapy because what if I'd been raped and had no memory of it? What if I had an STD or I was pregnant? Apparently I'm not hypnotizable. The therapist said that the fact that my underpants were still on the next morning, with no blood or tears in them, is the best assurance. So, I'm gonna hope that nothing really did happen. She did end up being right. I still have no memory of what happened. People, watch your drinks. Even if you're sitting at a table and it's right in front of you, hold it in your hand. Bring it everywhere with you, and don't judge a book by its cover. I almost learned that the hard way, and after that night, Lou's became my new favorite bar in Seattle. I'm a water guy. I read meters and maintain infrastructure like water lines and stuff. Most cities and towns show a water loss from month to month. We know how much water left the water plant has, and we know how much got sold to the meters and flushed from hydrants. Whatever doesn't get counted is the water loss. My town's water loss nearly doubled one month to a 12% loss. Something was up. There's a leak going on somewhere and we had to find it ASAP. Water costs money, and the higher the loss, the more tax dollars get spent paying for it. So we divide up the town into sections. About 40 of us split into teams of 2 men, and searched each section all day. My section included an abandoned water park. If you've never seen a water plant, Google it. It's like a large factory that is full of deep pools and huge pipes. The water plant hadn't been operational for about 15 years. There was no electricity, and the only lighting came from a few small, dirty windows. It looked like a scene from the movies. I went in through the back door. It had rotted and falling off hinges, so we just walked right in. The ground floor was just concrete. Walkways passed over the huge pools of water were. They had rusty railings with life preservers hanging on them. It was eerily quiet except for our footsteps. The water was black and stagnant. The whole place smelled like an old, musty basement, and at the end of the walkway, there was a metal staircase that went down into a dry pit that had some pumps and pipes. That's where the valves were located that isolated the plant from the rest of the water system. We shined our lights down into the pit and saw nothing that looked like it was out of place or leaking, so we turned around to head back out. My coworker had been there a few years ago and was talking about how the plant operated. He said there was a pretty cool laboratory upstairs, so we decided to check it out while we were still there. We went up the metal staircase to the second floor and entered the lab. It was actually pretty cool. They had all kinds of glassware and stuff still set up from the days they shut it down. It was all covered in dust and bird shit. The floor was scattered with old papers and more bird shit. I'm nosy, so I started opening file cabinets and desk drawers, looking at all the stuff they left behind. The whole place was like a time capsule. There was a wall of lockers where employees used to keep stuff. I opened each one, but remained disappointed. All empty. All along the other wall were the bathrooms. This plant was built in the 1920s and still had the original sinks and old-time toilets. As a former plumber, I found that interesting. Beside the bathrooms was another door, and I assumed it must be a closet or something. The door was already open a few inches, so I flung it open to see what was inside. As soon as I flung the door open, a cat jumped out and made the loudest angry scream I've ever heard a cat make. The floors were concrete, so the cat was trying its best to run away, but wasn't getting much traction on the slick floor. The cat screamed, I screamed, my coworker screamed, we all jumped, and the glass broke from shit we knocked over. It was all echoing throughout this huge, empty building. After we finished shitting ourselves and realized it was just a cat, we began laughing our asses off all the way back to inside our truck. It's gotta be the most scared I've ever been in my entire life. I was already creeped out by the stagnant pools of black water inside a pitch black building. It's like the feeling you get when you watch a scary movie and you know something is about to happen. Fun times, I guess. At age 12, I started babysitting for a family friend who had 3 daughters ages 4 to 7. They lived in a cul-de-sac where nearly every home housed a young couple with children in elementary school. The neighborhood was extremely close-knit, like the 1950s American block party community. They had a communal policy on using one another's toys. Any kid could use a play structure in someone else's yard anytime without asking. Shortly after I started working in the neighborhood, they revised the rule to anytime a family is not using a babysitter to watch their kids, to ensure I would not get overwhelmed supervising a swarm of kids that I wasn't paid to watch. It was more or less known when parents were going out and leaving someone else in charge of their children. I was welcome to take the girls to play in any other yard as they wanted. Their parents even gave me permission to let them play in someone else's yard or sandbox independently if I needed a short break. Being an avid Babysitters Club reader, I didn't leave the girls outside unsupervised either. I would wait until someone else wanted a water or bathroom break, and then corral everyone inside just temporarily. Similarly, when the girls wanted to play in the treehouse owned by an older couple a few doors up the street, I climbed up, despite a slight fear of heights, and crouched in the little house with them, despite feelings of claustrophobia, to follow my own rules. I don't recall whether everyone inside and everyone outside together rule would precede the first odd interaction that I had with the immediate next-door neighbor. But when the police questioned the girls I babysat years later, they said that nothing bad ever happened when I watched them because I set up this weird, sometimes annoying, rule. One day while playing basketball with the girls in the driveway, the next-door neighbor came outside in a baseball cap and sunglasses, and then just sat down on his second-story deck to read a paperback. I later noticed that he turned his chair about 180 degrees to face us, and the basketball hoop. I couldn't really tell if he was actually looking at us. He had no reaction to me staring at him, flipping pages in the book like someone would be when they're reading. This behavior repeated every time we played basketball for the 5 years that I watched those girls. Eventually, I noticed him in the chair, accessories on, and I would suggest a game we go play inside or in the front yard, just out of view. The strange neighbor was familiar to me as he went to my church. I have never seen someone kneel in a pew, head bowed and hands folded with the same intensity before or since. Once when my family was seated behind him, the priest came over to ask me to lead the children's mass because the usual person was out sick. This guy turned around and glared at me like I was personally set out to interrupt his prayer time. When I worked in the church nursery during various masses, I would often make eye contact with him as he waited in line outside the nursery door to use the restroom. From what I gleaned from our family friends and other people in the neighborhood, the odd basketball observer was a nice guy who gave up his apartment and job in the city to move in and care for his sick elderly mother. Since everyone thought he was great, and since he went to church, I figured I was in the wrong for finding him creepy. Even as young as 12, I was used to guys in their 40s and 50s asking me to go somewhere with them, or driving by slowly as I walked, biked, jogged, and made lewd comments to me. I figured I was projecting those experiences onto this awkward, quiet guy who was not doing anything wrong. For instance, I was certain that if this next-door neighbor was a creep, he would not miss the opportunity to watch with his sunglasses on and book in hand while the kids and I went swimming each summer. But he never set foot on his deck when the kids and I donned swimsuits to play in the pool or the backyard. I was more convinced that I was just being conceited and mean. Then when I was 15 or 16, I caught him looking in the window as I cleaned up after movie night. The girls and I put on a film after bath time, and instead of watching it theater style in total darkness, we kept some lights on so I could braid the girls' hair. The big screen TV we use for movies was located in an addition on the house with floor to ceiling windows. Though my parents were OCD about shutting blinds and curtains when the sun went down to hopefully prevent people from seeing in, our family friends had no window treatment on the big modern windows. So when I turned off the last light in the room, a floor lamp right next to the window facing the neighbor's house, I could see into the darkness outside, where a weird man sat on his deck in a chair in line with the window I was looking through. I looked over my shoulder and realized that he had line of sight on where the girls and I sat on the floor during the movie. As I looked back towards the house, I glimpsed him hustling back inside. I would have doubted I'd seen him at all if he'd not left the chair in an unusual spot. After watching him turn the chair around to read during many basketball matches, I knew where the chair sat that night, facing the window into the family room. And that was not the chair's usual position on the deck. After that incident, I would suggest playing board games in another room or insist on watching movies theater style, to ensure he could not peep on what we did at night. Once the girls were asleep, I avoided the family room entirely because I was paranoid about being watched. If I wasn't in the kitchen doing homework or reading away from all windows, I'd walk around the original first floor footprint of the house, where all the windows had curtains. The first time the parents noticed my change in routine, they insisted I could watch TV or movies in the family room, but I didn't mention anything to them because I was worried my concerns were silly and conceited. Fast forward to when I was 17. My family and I hear an evening cable news story about a man caught in our town in a police sting operation, in which a woman pretended to prostitute her child. When they raided his house, the police found a ton of CP on his computer. Our family friends called a couple of weeks later. They wanted to know how I knew the young man next door to them was not safe. He was the man we heard about on TV. As they described it, the police found his blog, where he wrote about his obsession with one of the girls who lived next door to him. In it, he detailed his fantasies involving her and his plans to act on them. Things like lying in the treehouse for hours, hoping to corner her when she climbed up to play alone. Many of his entries focused on taking advantage of or kidnapping the girl while the babysitter was in charge. In his head, babysitters were like the ones in old movies, talking to friends on the phone or making out with the boy they invited over instead of caring for the children. As it became clear I did neither of those things, his plans then evolved to killing the babysitter, taking the girl, and leaving the city. After talking to the girls to ensure that they were not victims, the police suggested that I might actually know something, having acted the way I did. All the pieces, the frequent run-ins at church when I had children to my care, or the weird things he did when he knew I was watching the kids next door, all of them fit together cohesively. I was relieved that I was just not mean-spirited or imagining those things. The focus was not on me, but on the children, but I was not crazy. I recognized that I was not the person most at risk in this situation. But yet, to the suburb pedo and would-be murderer, let's never ever meet again. I have an aunt that's not blood related that moved into a house in Ohio in the early 70s. I remember, and this being my earliest memory, waking up in a crib inside that house. My mom had me there as well, as we had a house we were moving into, but had 2 more days before we could actually move in. What I do remember is a sight that's been burned into my memory forever. I don't remember her actually putting me into bed, but I remember waking up in a very dark room. Peering down into the crib was a horrible monster with red eyes and a gaping maw with impossibly long fangs, 2 horns that curved back as well, and its hands were gripping each side of the crib. The fingers were long and it had very long, sharp nails. Quickly exploded into tears, crying hysterically. My mom entered the room almost immediately, turned on the light and tried to calm me down. She was just thinking that I woke up in an unfamiliar place and was scared, and she couldn't understand why. I no longer saw that monster, but I was trying to explain what I saw, and I remember my aunt looking very worried behind her. The next day, we were shopping at Eastland Mall, and my brother and sister joined us, having returned from my grandmother's house. We went back to my aunt's house because we were going to stay there one more night, with my brother and sister this time, which made me feel a little better, because I was terrified of that place. When we got there, my aunt unlocked the front door, but would only push in about an inch and wouldn't budge from there. My aunt was completely bewildered. She unlocked the side door and went into the garage. We all followed her through the garage and into the house, between the kitchen and the front living room, where we tried to enter before. As we all entered the living room, we were in complete shock at what we saw. Every single piece of furniture was stacked up against the front door. The couch, love seat, recliner chair, coffee table, end tables, lamps. I remember being thoroughly flummoxed, trying to piece in my young mind how this happened. My sister started crying, and my aunt called the police. They told us to exit the house and wait for them outside. When the police showed up, they walked through the whole house and saw no intruder nor any sign of forced entry. They grilled my aunt, asking her if anyone else had a set of keys or would play some kind of prank on her. She told them no, and even the police were uneasy about the situation. Like, maybe they too were being pranked. My uncle was in California for work, but my dad, who was out of town too, was due back the next day, which was comforting at the time. My other uncle, who lived nearby, came over with my older cousin, and they moved all the furniture back to where it belonged. When the front door was uncovered with the last item, the couch, my cousin yelled, "What the fuck?" My uncle called my aunt over to the front door. Her face drained all of her blood. "Sweet Jesus," she exclaimed. She hurried off to her bedroom, and we all clambered into the room to look at the door. We all saw it. 3 claw marks etched into the door from about halfway up to the floor. None of this really meant anything to me. I was too young to have any paranormal knowledge. My aunt returned with a hammer and nailed that cross into the door, right above where the claw scratch was. I was still super confused, and nobody would tell me why the cross was put there. My mom called my dad and explained the situation and asked us to get a hotel room. My dad thought all of this was rubbish, and being kind of tight on money, quickly told her no. My uncle agreed to stay with us there that night. My aunt and my mom, who were all visibly shaken, were all now talking in hushed tones well into the evening. They put cartoons on the TV, but still, the mood and everyone was uneasy. There's also foul odors coming and going, which made no sense. We all decided to have a big slumber party in the living room, on the floor and couches. My brother, who was 11 years old, had went into the bathroom, and as he was returning back to the living room, he started screaming. I remember wondering why. I couldn't see what was actually attacking him, but his pajama pants were literally shredded off of his legs. My mom ran and grabbed him, picked him up and ran into the living room. I began crying, my sister was crying, and my aunt had a cross held up saying prayers, asking for protection. At this point, my mom had had enough. "We're getting out of this place." So we all left. We did end up getting a hotel room, and my aunt got an adjoining room. We all slept fine, but we were all still traumatized, especially my poor brother. Back in the 70s, there weren't a lot of paranormal investigators and people willing to take on that type of thing. You were kind of on your own. My aunt and uncle had to move out of that house, and they sold it. And the next people who moved in didn't last very long either. It was several years before I really understood what happened there. We've always had a close relationship with my aunt who lived there. I'm guessing from all that traumatic experience that we had. There are demons in this world that are pure evil. They hate us with a passion and want nothing else but to destroy our lives. Hey everyone, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email or post it to my subreddit. You can stalk me on Twitter, you can stalk me on Facebook, or you can stalk me on Instagram. All these links are below. What's going on, guys? Big shout out to Uncle Unit for coming on and helping me with this episode. Great narrator, one of the top dogs. So I feel privileged and lucky that he was willing and able to come on and tell a story to you and alongside me. So feels good, looks good, understood good. Yep. What in the butt? But could probably also tell that my voice is going sideways. Yeah, I woke up this morning. Well, the last couple of mornings I've woke up, I've had a sore throat, and then last night I could feel myself like start to have to like clear my throat constantly, and my voice started cracking. So this morning I woke up and it was worse. I was still able to do today's episode, but you can definitely hear the sickness coming on. So don't know. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that whatever this is gone by next week. So next week's episodes won't get affected by it, because I don't like putting out content when I sound like shit, but I was able to do it today, so it's not too bad. You can definitely tell, but it's not too bad, so we'll see what happens. I'll keep y'all in the loop when it comes to that. Outside of that, I think I've got some trucker stories for next week. I've also got some night shift stories, so I'm gonna try to do what I did this week and do 2 15 to 20 minute themed episodes, and then continue with the true horror stories, true scary stories on Thursdays. We'll see how long that lasts, but as of right now, that's my plan to keep going. I think I forgot to put a short out yesterday, but I'm gonna put out another short today, so you'll have this. You probably already watched the short, whether you want to or not, and then obviously you're listening to this episode now. So yeah, I think that's it. I will see each and every single one of you dingleberries next week on Monday for trucker stories and or what did I say? Night shift stories. Yes. 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 Cheers.